I took the night shift because it paid $1 more an hour. And because I told myself I didn't mind being alone. At the time, that felt true. I was 24. Recently divorced. Sleeping badly anyway. And the nights were quieter. Fewer customers. Fewer managers breathing down my neck. Fewer reminders that my life had slid sideways. The place was a distribution warehouse on the edge of town. A long concrete building surrounded by weeds. And an empty parking lot that always smelled faintly of oil and wet cardboard. We shipped medical supplies, gloves, masks, for tubing. Nothing exciting. Nothing valuable enough to justify real security. One guard until midnight. Then just whoever was on shift. That was me. The first week was uneventful in the way nights usually are. The hum of fluorescent lights. The beep of scanners. The endless rattle of pallet jacks. The building settled and popped as the temperature dropped, making noises that sounded like footsteps if you weren't used to them. I learned to tell the difference. I learned the rhythm of the place. At 2 a.m., the conveyor belt on line 3 always squealed. At 3, the air kicked on harder. At 4, the world outside went completely still, like even the highway had fallen asleep. That was my favorite hour. I'd pour burnt coffee into a styrofoam cup and stand by the loading dock doors, staring out into the dark, feeling like I was the only person awake in the county. The first thing that unsettled me was the logbook. We had to sign in and out. Note any incidents. Anything broken or missing. On my third night, I noticed an entry that wasn't mine. Written in blocky letters that dug into the paper like whoever held the pen was angry. Door 6 checked. Nothing found. It was dated 2 days earlier. During my shift. I hadn't written it. I assumed it was the guard. But the guard signed his name. Always cursive. Always neat. This was different. I flipped back a page. Same handwriting. Another entry from a week before I'd started. Noise by coolers. Rats. There were 3 more like that. Scattered through the month. None signed. I told myself it was probably a temp. Someone who didn't know the procedure. I wrote it off. Because writing it off was easier than wondering. A few nights later, around 1:30, I heard a bang from the far end of the warehouse. Near the coolers. Not a settling pop. Not metal contracting. A bang. Like something heavy hitting a wall. I froze. Scanner in my hand. Heart jumping straight into my throat. I waited. Nothing. I walked down the aisle. My footsteps too loud. My breath echoing inside my head. The coolers hummed. Big metal doors sweating in the cold. Everything looked normal. I checked door 6. Because of the logbook note. Locked. I stood there for a long time. Listening. Feeling stupid. When I went back to my station. The coffee tasted sour. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something had watched me walk away. I started noticing little things after that. A pallet shifted. When I was sure I'd left it flush. A box tipped over. That I could swear had been stacked solid. The bathroom light on. When I knew I turned it off. Each thing alone meant nothing. Together, they felt like a pattern. My brain was desperate to complete. I didn't tell anyone. Night shift has a way of making you doubt yourself. And I didn't want to be the guy who cried wolf over shadows and noises. I needed the job. I needed the money. The smell came next. It was faint at first, like something sweet and rotten, drifting through the cool air. I assumed it was spoiled product. Maybe a box of gloves that had gotten damp and moldy. I mentioned it in the logbook. Check for spoiled boxes, smell near coolers. The next night, the entry was gone. The page was there, but my note had been torn out. Cleanly, like someone had taken a razor to it. My chest tightened when I saw that. People don't tear pages out of logbooks by accident. I called the supervisor, woke him up, apologized for the hour, told him about the smell and the missing page. He sighed, told me the cleaning crew probably messed with it, told me not to worry. I hung up feeling foolish and strangely exposed, like I'd just announced myself to something that preferred I stay quiet. Around that time, the guard stopped walking the perimeter. He'd sit in his car until midnight, engine running, lights off, then peel out of the lot, like he couldn't get away fast enough. One night I asked him if everything was okay. He looked at me for a long second. Eyes red-rimmed, jaw tight. "You hear things in there?" he asked. I laughed it off. Said old buildings make noise. He nodded too fast, like he was agreeing with me, because that was easier. "Yeah," he said. "Noise." Then he left. The night it all broke open started like any other. Rain slicked the parking lot, turning the security lights into smeared halos. The warehouse felt smaller, the darkness pressing closer to the aisles. I was labeling boxes when the power flickered. Just a blink, enough to make the lights stutter, and my heart stutter with them. When they steadied, the smell was stronger. It was unmistakable now. Decay. My stomach rolled. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and followed the smell toward the coolers, telling myself it was a dead animal, that this happens sometimes, that maintenance would handle it in the morning. Door 6 was open. I know it was locked before. I remember the cold metal under my hand. Now it hung ajar, a black slice in the wall breathing out cold air, and that awful sweetness. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me, but I stepped closer anyway, because that's what you do when you're trying to prove you're not afraid. The flashlight beam trembled as it cut through the dark. The cooler was packed tighter than usual, boxes stacked in uneven towers, like someone had been in a hurry. The smell was strongest at the back. I moved boxes aside, my hands numb from the cold, my breath fogging. That's when I saw the shoe. A man's work boot, scuffed and muddy, wedged between pallets. For a second, my brain refused to process it. Shoes don't belong in shipments. Shoes belong to people. I dropped the box I was holding. It burst open, gloves spilling like pale hands across the floor. I took another step, and the beam found a leg, then a torso, folded unnaturally, wrapped in plastic like an extra-large piece of inventory. I don't remember screaming, but my throat hurt afterward, so I must have. I staggered back, slipped, caught myself on a pallet, the cold biting through my jacket. The face stared up at me, eyes half open, skin waxy, mouth pulled into a shape that might have been surprise. I recognized him. It took a horrible second, but I did. It was the guard. I ran. I didn't think. I bolted out of the cooler, down the aisle, my shoes slapping on concrete, my chest burning. I fumbled for my phone to call 911 and realized I'd dropped it. Panic roared in my ears. I veered toward the office, toward the landline. Halfway there, the lights went out. Total darkness swallowed me, thick and immediate. The died. The building went quiet, in a way I'd never heard before, like it was holding its breath. I stood frozen, listening to my own heartbeat, waiting for the lights to come back. They didn't. Somewhere in the dark, something scraped. Slow, deliberate. "Hello?" I shouted, my voice cracking. It was a stupid thing to do, but the silence pressed so hard. I needed to break it. The scraping stopped. Then I heard footsteps. Not the echoing, hollow sound of the building settling. Footsteps. Measured. Moving toward me. I backed up. Hands out. Feeling for anything. My fingers brushed a pallet jack. I grabbed it. Held it like a weapon, though I knew it was useless. The footsteps came closer. I could smell them now. The same sweet rot, mixed with sweat, and something metallic. My mouth filled with the taste of fear. I swung the jack blindly. When the darkness in front of me shifted, it connected with something solid. There was a grunt, a wet sound, and the footsteps stumbled. I ran again, following memory more than sight, counting steps, turning when I thought I should turn. I slammed into a shelf, boxes raining down, pain flaring in my shoulder. Hands grabbed at me in the dark, fingers digging into my jacket. I twisted, kicked, felt my foot connect with a shin. The hands slipped. I kept going, lungs screaming, until I crashed through the office door and slammed it shut behind me. I threw my weight against it, fumbling for the lock. The emergency lights flickered and then, bathing the office in a dim red glow. Through the narrow window in the door, I saw him. He was tall, thin, wearing a jacket like mine, his face half hidden by shadow. His eyes caught the red light and reflected it, making them look wrong, too bright. He smiled at the door, slow and calm, like we were sharing a joke. Then he leaned in and tapped on the glass with one finger. "You found him," he said, his voice muffled, but clear enough to hear. I was wondering when. I slid down the door, shaking, my mind scrambling for something. Anything. The landline sat on the desk, placidly solid. I crawled to it, dialed with trembling fingers. No dial tone. The lines were dead. Of course they were. I laughed then. A broken sound. That surprised me as much as anything else. He tried the handle. Locked. He stepped back. Out of view. For a second, I thought he was leaving. Then the sound of metal rang out as he struck the door. Once. Twice. 3 times. Each hit sent a shudder through the frame. I scrambled to my feet, looked around. The office was a dead end. No windows big enough. No second door. My eyes landed on the breaker panel. Open. Switches flipped down. He cut the power. He'd planned this. The door bowed inward with another blow. Wood splintered. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a metal stapler, and held it like it might save me. My whole body shook so hard. My teeth chattered. The door finally gave, the lock tearing free, with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. He stepped through, calm as ever, wiping his hands on his jacket. "Night shift's quiet," he said conversationally. "People don't notice things. People disappear." He moved toward me, and something in me snapped. I hurled the stapler at his face. It clipped his cheek, drawing a line of blood. He hissed, more annoyed than hurt. I dove past him, felt his fingers graze my hair, and bolted for the loading dock. The emergency lights strobed as I ran, painting the warehouse in jerky red snapshots. I could hear him behind me, not rushing, not panicking. He knew the building better than I did. He'd had time. I reached the dock doors and slammed my hand on the button. Nothing. Power was still out. I grabbed the manual chain and pulled, muscles screaming. The door crept up inch by inch. Rain lashed darkness waiting on the other side. I ducked under as soon as there was space, scraped my back, and tumbled out onto the wet concrete. Cold rain shocked me, cleared my head, just enough to make one thought cut through. My car. I sprinted across the lot, slipped, caught myself, my shoes soaked. I fumbled with my keys, dropped them, sobbing now, not caring. The engine roared to life. I threw the car into reverse. As he emerged from the dock, rain plastering his hair to his skull, blood mixing with water on his cheek. He watched me go, head tilted, like he was memorizing my face. I didn't stop driving until I hit the police station. I ran inside, soaked and shaking, words tumbling over each other. They listened. They went back with me. Lights flashing, guns drawn. The warehouse was bright and loud and full of people again, like it had never been anything else. They found the guard. They found more, too, hidden in coolers and false walls, wrapped and stacked like inventory. He was gone, slipped out into the rain, into the dark. They never caught him. The warehouse shut down. The building sits empty now, windows boarded, weeds taller than the loading docks. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I think about the logbook, about those torn pages, and unsigned notes. I think about how quiet the night shift is, how easy it is to believe you're alone. I never thought a hospital could feel like a trap until I was admitted to St. Elora Medical Center on a rainy Tuesday night, the kind of rain that sticks to the windows and makes everything outside look distorted. I was there for what they told me was a routine infection, something they said would clear up with 4 antibiotics and a few days of observation. I remember signing my name with a shaking hand, feeling embarrassed by how weak I already felt, trusting the place because that's what you're supposed to do. Hospitals are where you go to be saved. That belief stayed with me for exactly one night. The first thing that bothered me wasn't pain or fear. It was the quiet. The halls were too quiet, like sound was being swallowed. Even the machines seemed to beep softer than they should. I was placed in a semi-private room, but the other bed stayed empty. They told me someone would be moved in later. No one ever was. That empty bed became a presence of its own, a shape in my peripheral vision that made me uneasy whenever I turned my head. My nurse that first night introduced herself as Karen. Middle-aged, calm voice, efficient hands. She smiled without showing teeth. She checked my four, adjusted my blanket, asked me to rate my pain. I said it was manageable. She nodded, like she already knew that answer, like my words didn't matter. Before she left, she paused at the door and looked back at me. Not a quick glance, a full, slow look, like she was memorizing my face. Then, she turned off the light and closed the door. I woke up hours later to the feeling of someone standing near my bed, not touching me, just close enough that I could sense them. My eyes adjusted slowly, and I saw Karen again, silhouetted by the dim hallway light. She was staring at the monitor above my bed, her head tilted slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. When I asked if something was wrong, she jumped just a little, then smiled too fast. "Just checking on you," she said. "Go back to sleep." She didn't leave right away. She stood there for another few seconds, watching the numbers on the screen, watching me. When she finally walked out, I noticed my bag was different. I told myself I was imagining things. Infection, fever, medication. Hospitals mess with your head. The next morning, a different nurse came in. Younger, nervous energy. Her name tag said Emily. I asked her about Karen. Mentioned she checked on me late at night. Emily's face changed. Not dramatically, but enough. She said Karen worked nights sometimes. Then, she changed the subject. Asked if I'd eaten breakfast. That day, I started noticing things. How Karen seemed to appear without warning. How she always volunteered to handle my medications. How the empty bed across from me stayed perfectly made, untouched, like it was reserved. I heard crying at night from down the hall, soft and desperate, cut short every time. When I asked about it, I was told a patient had been discharged. On the third night, my condition worsened. My heart raced. My chest felt tight, and I pressed the call button. Karen came in, alone. She checked my vitals, frowned, and said she'd adjust my medication. I watched her inject something into my foreline. It burned going in. A deep, cold burn that spread through my arm. I asked what it was. She said it would help me rest. I didn't sleep. I drifted in and out of something worse. A heavy fog, where my thoughts felt trapped. I couldn't move my limbs. I couldn't speak. I could hear, though. I heard Karen come back. I heard her pull the curtain around my bed. I heard her breathing, slow and steady, too close to my ear. "You're not supposed to wake up from this part," she whispered. Panic tore through me, but my body wouldn't respond. She talked like she was explaining something to herself, not to me. She said she liked the quiet patients best, the ones who didn't have family visiting, the ones who trusted too easily. She said hospitals were perfect, because death already lived there, and no one questioned it when it moved rooms. I felt pressure on my chest. Not hands, but weight. like she was leaning in close, watching my heart rate spike on the monitor. She made a sound that might have been a laugh. Then, footsteps in the hall. The curtain moved. Someone asked if she needed help. Karen stepped away. Her voice instantly professional, calm. The pressure lifted. I focused everything I had on breathing, on staying conscious. The next morning, Emily was back. I must have looked worse, because she asked if I was okay, in a voice that cracked. I tried to tell her. My mouth felt dry. My words slurred. But I said Karen had given me something, and said I wasn't supposed to wake up. Emily froze. She checked my chart, flipped pages too fast. Then, she left the room without saying anything. That afternoon, a doctor came in with security. They asked me questions, gentle but urgent. Had Karen been alone with me? Had she administered medication without orders? Had she said anything strange? As I talked, pieces started clicking together. The crying at night, the empty bed, the discharges that never felt real. They moved me to another floor, under precautionary measures. I didn't see Karen again. 2 days later, I overheard nurses whispering at the station. Karen had been arrested, at home, that morning. They said she'd been under investigation for months. They said several patient deaths had been quietly reclassified, chalked up to complications. They said I was lucky. The official story never mentioned what she said to me. It never mentioned how close I came to disappearing into paperwork and quiet condolences. When I was discharged, I asked for records. Parts were missing. Medication times didn't line up. Names were redacted. I still smell antiseptic sometimes. When I wake up at night, I still feel that burning in my arm. Hospitals terrify me now. Not because of illness, but because I know how easy it is to hide a crime. In a place built for trust. I survived. Because someone walked down the hall at the right moment. Because I woke up when I wasn't supposed to. Every time I pass a hospital, I wonder how many empty beds are waiting, perfectly made, for someone who believes they're safe. I still remember the exact way the streetlight flickered when I raised my hand for that taxi, like it was trying to warn me without knowing how. And if I'd been less tired or less desperate to get home, maybe I would have listened. It was just past midnight, the kind of quiet hour where the city feels hollowed out. And I just finished a double shift at a downtown restaurant. After covering for someone who didn't show. My phone was dead. My feet hurt. And the buses had already stopped running. When the yellow cab rolled up, the engine idling too loud in the empty street, I felt relief more than anything. The driver leaned across the seat and pushed the passenger door open without saying a word. And that should have been the first red flag. But exhaustion dulls instincts. I slid in and gave him my address. He nodded once, eyes never meeting mine in the mirror, and pulled away from the curb. The inside of the cab smelled like old coffee, and something metallic, like pennies rubbed together. And the radio was off, which made the hum of the tires feel louder than it should have been. For the first few minutes, everything felt normal enough. We passed the closed storefronts, the dark windows reflecting back at me, and I watched the meter tick up, thinking only about getting home, taking a shower, and collapsing into bed. Then I noticed we weren't taking the usual route. He turned off onto a side street. that cut through an industrial stretch I didn't recognize. And when I leaned forward and said, "Hey, that's not the way to Maple," he answered too quickly, saying there was construction. His voice flat and rehearsed. I sat back, telling myself not to be paranoid. But my stomach tightened anyway. The streets grew darker. Fewer streetlights. Warehouses hunched back from the road, like they were hiding something. I tried to catch his eyes in the rearview mirror, but he'd adjusted it so I could barely see his forehead. That's when I noticed the child-lock light glowing on the door. I tested the handle casually, like I was just fidgeting, and it didn't open. I told myself, maybe all taxis had that. But I'd been in enough cabs to know that wasn't true. My heart started to pound, and I could feel sweat breaking out along my hairline. I asked him to pull over, said I needed to get out, and he didn't respond at all. He just kept driving, knuckles white on the wheel. I raised my voice, louder this time, and he finally spoke, telling me to calm down, that I was making him nervous. And the way he said it made it sound like a threat, instead of a request. The city felt very far away then, like I'd slipped into some other place that only existed at night. I reached into my bag, pretending to look for something, and my fingers brushed against my keys. I wrapped them around my knuckles without thinking, the way my mom taught me when I was a teenager. The cab slowed as we approached a red light at an empty intersection, and in that moment, adrenaline flooded my body. I lunged forward, slamming my fist into the divider and yelling for him to let me out. The sound was explosive in the small space, and he flinched, cursing. And for a split second, he turned his head. That was all it took. I jammed my thumb against the door lock, but it didn't budge. He hit the gas, blowing through the red light, and I screamed, the sound tearing out of me, raw and ugly. He shouted back, telling me to shut up, that no one could hear me out here. And that's when I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. I started pounding on the window, my palm stinging, my voice hoarse, and I could see his shoulders tense, like he was preparing for something. We turned down an even narrower road. The pavement cracked, weeds pushing through, and I could smell the river nearby. My mind raced, flipping through every true crime story I'd ever heard, every ending that didn't end well. I thought about my apartment, about the plant I always forgot to water, about how my sister would keep texting me in the morning when I didn't show up for work. I didn't want to disappear in the back of a cab. As we slowed near a chain-link fence, I did the only thing I could think of. I leaned forward and smashed my keys into his neck. Not hard enough to kill him, but hard enough to make him scream and jerk the wheel. The cab swerved, tires squealing, and he slammed on the brakes. In the chaos, the locks clicked open. I didn't think. I just moved, throwing myself at the door and tumbling out onto the gravel. As the cab lurched to a stop, pain shot up my arm and leg, but I was already scrambling to my feet, running without knowing where. Just away. I heard him yelling behind me, the engine revving, and for a terrifying second, I thought he'd run me down. Instead, the cab peeled away in the opposite direction, disappearing into the dark. I collapsed behind a dumpster, gasping, my whole body shaking so hard, my teeth chattered. I stayed there for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, listening for the sound of that engine coming back. When I finally staggered onto a main road, a passing driver called 911 for me, and the police arrived, lights flashing, asking me questions I struggled to answer through tears. They took a report, drove me home, told me they'd look for the cab. Days later, a detective called and said they found it abandoned near the river, wiped clean, no driver in sight. He told me there had been other reports, other late-night passengers who'd felt something was off, but got away sooner. Hearing that made my knees go weak. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I think about how close I came to being another story someone else tells, about how a simple ride home turned into the most terrifying night of my life. And I still can't flag a taxi after midnight without my heart starting to race.